Chapter 5 of Travels in the Central Parts of Indo-China, Siam, Cambodia and Laos during the years 1858, 59 and 60 by Henri Mouhot. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Here I am, once more installed in the house of a good old Chinese, a pepper planter whose hospitality I enjoyed on my first visit to the place 2 months ago. His name is Yu Hao, but in Siamese he is called Apait, which means uncle. He is a widower with 2 sons, the eldest 18, a good young man, lively, hard-working, brave, and persevering. He is already much attached to me and is desirous of accompanying me to Cambodia. Born amidst the mountains and naturally intelligent, there are none of the quadrupeds and few of the feathered tribes found in the district with whose habits he is not familiar. He fears neither tiger nor elephant. All this, added to his amiable disposition, made Fry, that is his name, a real treasure to me. Apait has also 2 brothers who have become Catholics and have settled at Chantaboon in order to be near a Christian place of worship. He himself has never had any desire to change his religion, because he says if he did, he must forget his deceased parents, for whom he frequently offers sacrifices. He is badly off, having incurred a debt of 50 tikals, for which he has to pay 10 as yearly interest, the rate in Siam being always 20 or 30%. Besides this, he has various taxes to pay, 12 tikals for his 2 sons, 4 for his house, 1 for his furnace, 1 for his pig. The tax on the pepper field is 8 tikals, 1 on his areca trees, 1 on the betel cultivated by him, and 2 selongs for a cocoa tree, altogether 39 tikals. His land brings him in 40 after all expenses are paid. What can he do with the 1 remaining tikal? The unlucky agriculturalists of this kind, and there are many, live on vegetables and on the rice which they obtain from the Siamese in exchange for areca. On my return from the islands I had been detained nearly 10 days at Chantaboon, unable to walk. I had cut my heel in climbing the rocks on the shore at Coman, and as I was constantly barefooted in the salt water, the wound soon closed. But afterwards I began to suffer from it. My foot swelled, and I was obliged to reopen the wound to extract a piece of shell which had remained in it. As soon as I could leave Chantaboon, I hired a carriage and 2 buffaloes to take me to the mountain. I experienced much gratification in finding myself again amongst these quiet scenes, at once so lovely and so full of grandeur. Here are valleys intersected by streams of pure and limpid water, there small plains, over which are scattered the modest dwellings of the laborious Chinese, while a little in the distance rises the mountain with its imposing rocks, its grand trees, its torrents and waterfalls. We have already had some storms, for the rainy season is approaching. Vegetation is fresh and nature animated. The song of birds and the hum of insects are heard all around. Apait has resigned to me his bed, if that can be so styled, which consists merely of a few laths of areca placed upon 4 stakes. I have extended my mat upon this framework, and should enjoy uninterrupted sleep all night, were it not for the swarms of ants, which frequently disturb me by passing over my body, getting under my clothes and into my beard, and, I almost fancy, would end by dragging me out, if I did not from time to time shake them off. Occasionally great spiders and other disgusting creatures, crawling about under the roof, would startle me by dropping suddenly on my face. The heat now is quite endurable, the thermometer generally marking 80 degrees Fahrenheit in the morning and 90 degrees in the middle of the day. The water of the streams is so cool and refreshing that a good morning and evening ablution makes me comfortable for several hours, as well as contributing to keep me in health. Last evening Fry, having gone along with my man Niu to Chantaboon to buy provisions, brought back to his father some Chinese bonbons, for which he had paid half a franc. The poor old man was delighted with them, and this morning at daybreak he dressed himself in his best clothes, on which I asked him what was going to happen. He immediately began to clean a plank, which was fitted into the wall to serve as a sort of table or altar. Above this was a drawing of a man dancing and putting out his tongue, with claws on his feet and hands, and with the tail of an ape, intended to represent his father. He then filled 3 small cups with tea, put the bonbons in a 4th, and placed the whole upon the simple altar. Finally, lighting 2 pieces of odoriferous wood, he began his devotions. It was a sacrifice to the manes of his parents, performed with the hope that their souls would come and taste the good things set before them. At the entrance to Apayit's garden, in front of his house, I had made a kind of shed with stakes and branches of trees, covered with a roof of leaves, where I dried and prepared my large specimens, such as the long-armed apes, kids, and hornbills, as also my collections of insects. All this has attracted a crowd of inquisitive Siamese and Chinamen, who come to see the Farang and admire his curiosities. We have just passed the Chinese New Year's Day, and as it has been a fete for 3 days, all those living at any distance have profited by the opportunity to visit us. At times Apayit's house and garden have been crowded with people in their holiday dresses, many of whom, seeing my instruments, my naturalist's case, and different preparations, took me for a great doctor and begged for medicines. Alas, my pretensions are not so high. However, I treat them on the Raspail system, and a little box of pomade or phial of sedative water will perhaps be represented in some European museum by an insect or shell brought to me by these worthy people in return for the good I would gladly do them. It is very agreeable, after a fatiguing day's chase over hills and amongst dense forests, through which one must cut one's way, axe in hand, to repose in the evening on the good Chinaman's bench in front of his house, shaded by bananas, cocoa-nut, and other trees. For the last 4 days a violent north wind, fresh in spite of the season, has been blowing without intermission, breaking asunder, and tearing up by the roots some of the trees on the higher grounds. This is its farewell visit, for the southeast wind will now blow for many months. This evening everything appeared to me more beautiful and agreeable than usual. The stars shone brightly in the sky, the moon was clear. Sitting by Apayit while his son played to me some Chinese airs on the bamboo flute, I thought to what a height of prosperity this province, even now one of the most interesting and flourishing in the country, might attain, were it wisely and intelligently governed, or if European colonists were to settle and develop its resources. Proximity to the sea, facility of communication, a rich soil, a healthy and propitious climate, nothing is wanting to ensure success to an industrious and enterprising agriculturalist. The worthy old Apayit has at last consented to allow his son to enter my service, provided I pay him 30 tikals, half a year's wages, in advance. This will enable him, if he can sell his house and pepperfield, to clear off his debt and retire to another part of the mountain. Fry is delighted to attend me and to run about the woods all day, and I am not less pleased with our bargain, for his knowledge of the country, his activity, his intelligence and attachment to me are invaluable. The heat becomes greater and greater, the thermometer having risen to 102 degrees Fahrenheit in the shade. Thus hunting is now a painful and sometimes impossible exertion, anywhere except in the woods. A few days ago I took advantage of a short spell of cloudy and consequently cooler weather to visit a waterfall I had heard of in the almost desert district of Prion, 12 miles from Kombao. After reaching the last named place, our course lay for about an hour and a half along a charming valley, nearly as smooth as a lawn, and as ornamental as a park. By and by, entering a forest, we kept by the banks of a stream, which, shut in between 2 mountains and studded with blocks of granite, increases in size as you approach its source. Before long we arrived at the fall, which must be a fine spectacle in the rainy season. It then pours down from immense perpendicular rocks, forming as it were a circular peaked wall, nearly 30 meters in diameter and 20 meters in height. The force of the torrent having been broken by the rocky bed into which it descends, there is another fall of 10 feet, and lower down, after a third fall of 15 feet, it passes into an ample basin, which, like a mirror, reflects the trees and cliffs around. Even during the dry season, the spring then running from beneath enormous blocks of granite flows in such abundance as to feed several streams. I was astonished to see my 2 servants, heated by their long walk, bathe in the cold water, and on my advising them to wait for a little, they replied that the natives were always accustomed to bathe when hot. We all turned stone-cutters, that is to say, we set to work to detach the impression of an unknown animal from the surface of an immense mass of granite rising up out of one of the mountain torrents. A Chinese had in January demanded so exorbitant a sum for this that I had abandoned the idea, intending to content myself with an impression in wax, but Fry proposed to me to undertake the work, and by joint labour it was soon accomplished. The Siamese do not much like my meddling with their rocks, and their superstition is also somewhat startled when I happen to kill a white ape, although when the animal is dead and skinned, they are glad to obtain a cutlet or steak from it, for they attribute to the flesh of this creature great medicinal virtues. The rainy season is drawing near, storms become more and more frequent, and the growling of the thunder is frightful. Insects are in greater numbers, and the ants, which are now looking out for a shelter, invade the dwellings, and are a perfect pest to my collections, not to speak of myself and my clothes. Several of my books and maps have been almost devoured in one night. Fortunately, there are no mosquitoes, but to make up for this, there is a small species of leech, which when it rains, quits the streams and infests the woods, rendering an excursion there, if not impracticable, at all events very disagreeable. You have constantly to be pulling them off you by dozens, but as some always escape observation, you are sure to return home covered with blood. Often my white trousers are dyed as red as those of a French soldier. The animals have now become scarcer, which in different ways is a great disappointment to all, for Fry and New feasted sumptuously on the flesh of the apes, and made a profit by selling their gall to the Chinese doctors in Chantaboon. Hornbills also have turned wild, so we can find nothing to replenish our larder but an occasional kid. Large stags feed on the mountain, but one requires to watch all night to get within range of them. There are not many birds to be seen, neither quails, partridges, nor pheasants, and the few wild fowl which occasionally make their appearance are so difficult to shoot that it is a waste both of time and ammunition to make the attempt. In this part of the country the Siamese declare they cannot cultivate bananas on account of the elephants, which at certain times come down from the mountains and devour the leaves, of which they are very fond. The royal and other tigers abound here. Every night they prowl about in the vicinity of the houses, and in the mornings we can see the print of their large claws in the sand and in the clay near streams. By day they retire to the mountain, where they lurk in close and inaccessible thickets. Now and then you might get near enough to one to have a shot at him, but generally, unless suffering from hunger, they fly at the approach of man. A few days ago I saw a young Chinese who had 19 wounds on his body made by one of these animals. He was looking out from a tree about 9 feet high, when the cries of a young kid, tied to another tree at a short distance, attracted a large tiger. The young man fired at it, but though mortally wounded, the creature, collecting all his strength for a final spring, leaped on his enemy, seized him and pulled him down, tearing his flesh frightfully with teeth and claws as they rolled on the ground. Luckily for the unfortunate Chinese, it was a dying effort, and in a few moments more the tiger relaxed its hold and breathed its last. In the mountains of Chantaboon, and not far from my present abode, precious stones of fine water occur. There is even at the east of the town an eminence, which they call the Mountains of Precious Stones. Though it would appear from the account of Monsieur Pellegrin that at one time they were abundant in that locality, since in about half an hour he picked up a handful, which is as much as now can be found in a 12-month, nor can they be purchased at any price. It seems that I have seriously offended the poor Thai of Kumbao by carrying away the footprints. I have met several natives who tell me they have broken arms, that they can no longer work, and will always henceforth be in poverty, and I find that I am considered to be answerable for this, because I irritated the genius of the mountain. Henceforth they will have good excuse for idleness. The Chinese have equally amused me. They imagine that some treasure ought to be found beneath the footprints, and that the block which I have carried away must possess great medicinal virtues. So Upper-Eat and his friends have been rubbing the under part of the stone every morning against another piece of granite, and, collecting carefully the dust that fell from it, have mixed it with water and drunk it fasting, fully persuaded that it is a remedy against all ills. Here they say that it is faith which cures, and it is certain that pills are often enough administered in the civilized West, which have no more virtue than the granite powder swallowed by old Upper-Eat. His uncle Tiu O has disposed of his property for him for 60 ticals, so that, after paying off his debts, he will have left, including the sum I gave him for his son's services, 40 ticals. Here that is enough to make a man think himself rich to the end of his days. He can at times regale the souls of his parents with tea and bonbons, and live himself like a true country mandarin. Before leaving Kumbao, the old man secured me another lodging, for which I had to pay 2 ticals, 6 francs, a month, and I lost nothing in point of comfort by the change. For furnished apartments, I think the charge not unreasonable. The list of furniture is as follows. In the dining room, nothing. In the bedroom, an old mat on a camp bed. However, this house is cleaner and larger than the other, and better protected from the weather. In the first, the water came in all directions. Then the camp bed, which is a large one, affords a pleasant lounge after my hunting expeditions. Besides which advantages, my new landlord furnishes me with bananas and vegetables, for which I pay in game when the chase has been successful. The fruit here is exquisite, particularly the mango, the mangosteen, the pineapple, so fragrant and melting in the mouth, and also superior to anything I've ever imagined or tasted, the famous durian or durian, which justly merits the title of king of fruits. But to enjoy it thoroughly, one must have time to overcome the disgust, at first inspired by its smell, which is so strong that I could not stay in the same place with it. On first tasting it, I thought it like the flesh of some animal in a state of putrefaction, but after 4 or 5 trials I found the aroma exquisite. The durian is about 2/3 the size of a jacar, and like it is encased in a thick and prickly rind, which protects it from the teeth of squirrels and other nibblers. On opening it, there are to be found 10 cells, each containing a kernel larger than a date, and surrounded by a sort of white or sometimes yellowish cream, which is most delicious. By an odd freak of nature, not only is there the first repugnance to it to overcome, but if you eat it often, though with ever so great moderation, you'll find yourself next day covered with blotches, as if attacked with measles, so heating is its nature. A durian picked is never good, for when fully ripe it falls of itself. When cut open it must be eaten at once, as it quickly spoils, but otherwise it will keep for 3 days. At Bangkok one of them costs 1 salung. At Chantabun 9 may be obtained for the same sum. I had come to the conclusion that there was little danger in traversing the woods here, and in our search for butterflies and other insects, we often took no other arms than the hatchet and hunting knife, while New had become so confident as to go by night with Fry to lie in wait for stags. Our sense of security was, however, rudely shaken when one evening a panther rushed upon one of the dogs close to my door. The poor animal uttered a heart-rending cry, which brought us all out, as well as our neighbours, each torch in hand. Finding themselves face to face with a panther, they in their turn raised their voices in loud screams, but it was too late for me to get my gun, for in a moment the beast was out of reach. In a few weeks I must say farewell to these beautiful mountains, never in all probability to see them again, and I think of this with regret. I have been so happy here, and have so much enjoyed my hunting and my solitary walks in this comparatively temperate climate, after my sufferings from the heat and mosquitoes in my journey northwards. Thanks to my nearness to the sea on the one side and on the mountain region on the other, the period of the greatest heat passed away without my perceiving it. I was much surprised at receiving a few days ago a letter from Bangkok, which stated that it had been hotter weather there than had been known for more than 30 years. Many of the European residents had been ill, yet I do not think the climate of Bangkok more unhealthy than that of other towns of Eastern Asia within the tropics. But no doubt the want of exercise, which is there almost impossible, induces illness in many cases. A few days ago I made up my mind to penetrate into a grotto on Mount Sabab, halfway between Chantabun and Kombao, so deep, I am told, that it extends to the top of the mountain. I set out, accompanied by Fry and New, furnished with all that was necessary for our excursion. On reaching the entrance of the grotto, we lighted our torches, and, after scaling a number of blocks of granite, began our march. Thousands of bats, roused by the lights, commenced flying round and round us, flapping our faces with their wings, and extinguishing our torches every minute. Fry walked first, trying the ground with a lance which he held, but we had scarcely proceeded 100 paces when he threw himself back upon me with every mark of terror, crying out, "A serpent! Go back!" As he spoke, I perceived an enormous boa, about 15 feet off, with erect head and open mouth, ready to dart upon him. My gun being loaded, one barrel with 2 bullets, the other with shot, I took aim and fired off both at once. We were immediately enveloped in a thick cloud of smoke, and could see nothing, but prudently beat an instant retreat. We waited anxiously for some time at the entrance of the grotto, prepared to do battle with our enemy should he present himself, but he did not appear. My guide now boldly lighted a torch, and, furnished with my gun reloaded and a long rope, went in again alone. We held one end of the rope, that at the least signal we might fly to his assistance. For some minutes, which appeared terribly long, our anxiety was extreme, but equally great were our relief and gratification when we saw him approach, drawing after him the rope, to which was attached an immense boa. The head of the reptile had been shattered by my fire, and his death had been instantaneous, but we sought to penetrate no farther into the grotto. I had been told that the Siamese were about to celebrate a grand fete at a pagoda about 3 miles off, in honour of a superior priest who died last year, and whose remains were now to be burned according to the customs of the country. I went to see this singular ceremony, hoping to gain some information respecting the amusements of these people, and arrived at the place about 8 in the morning, the time for breakfast, or king cow, rice eating. Nearly 2,000 Siamese of both sexes from Chantabun and the surrounding villages, some in carriages and some on foot, were scattered over the ground in the neighbourhood of the pagoda. All wore new sashes and dresses of brilliant colours, and the effect of the various motley groups was most striking. Under a vast roof of planks, supported by columns, forming a kind of shed, bordered by pieces of stuff covered with grotesque paintings representing men and animals in the most extraordinary attitudes, was constructed an imitation rock of coloured pasteboard, on which was placed a catafalque lavishly decorated with gilding and carved work, and containing an urn in which were the precious remains of the priest. Here and there were arranged pieces of paper and stuff in the form of flags. Outside the building was prepared the funeral pile, and at some distance off a platform was erected for the accommodation of a band of musicians, who played upon different instruments of the country. Farther away some women had established a market for the sale of fruit, bonbons, and arrack, while in another quarter some Chinamen and Siamese were performing, in a little theatre run up for the occasion, scenes something in the style of those exhibited by our strolling actors at fairs. This fete, which lasted for 3 days, had nothing at all in it of a funereal character. I had gone there hoping to witness something new and remarkable, but these peculiar rites are only celebrated in honour of sovereigns, nobles, and other persons of high standing, but I had omitted to take into consideration the likelihood of my being myself an object of curiosity to the crowd. Scarcely, however, had I appeared in the pagoda, followed by Fry and New, when on all sides I heard the exclamation, "Farang! Come and see the farang!" and immediately both Siamese and Chinamen left their bowls of rice and pressed about me. I hoped that, once their curiosity was gratified, they would leave me in peace, but instead of that the crowd grew thicker and thicker and followed me wherever I went, so that at last it became almost unbearable, and all the more so as most of them were already drunk, either with opium or arrack, many indeed with both. I quitted the pagoda and was glad to get into the fresh air again, but the respite was of short duration. Passing the entrance of a large hut temporarily built of planks, I saw some chiefs of provinces sitting at breakfast. The senior of the party advanced straight towards me, shook me by the hand, and begged me in a cordial and polite manner to enter, and I was glad to avail myself of his kind offer, and take refuge from the troublesome people. My hosts overwhelmed me with attentions, and forced upon me pastry, fruit, and bonbons, but the crowd who had followed me forced their way into the building and hemmed us in on all sides. Even the roof was covered with gazers. All of a sudden we heard the walls crack, and the whole of the back of the hut, yielding under the pressure, fell in, and people, priests and chiefs, tumbling one upon another. The scene of confusion was irresistibly comic. I profited by the opportunity to escape, swearing, though rather late in the day, that they should not catch me again. I know not what it is to be attributed, unless it be the pure air of the mountains and a more active life, but the mountaineers of Chantabun appear a much finer race than the Siamese of the plain, more robust and of a darker complexion. Their features also are more regular, and I should imagine that they sprang rather from the Aryan than from the Mongolian race. They remind me of the Siamese and Laotians whom I met with in the mountains of Pak Priao. Will the present movement of the nations of Europe towards the east result in good by introducing into these lands the blessings of our civilization? Or shall we, as blind instruments of boundless ambition, come hither as a scourge to add to their present miseries? Here are millions of unhappy creatures in great poverty in the midst of the richest and most fertile region imaginable, bowing shamefully under a servile yoke made viler by despotism and the most barbarous customs, living and dying in utter ignorance of the only true God. I quitted with regret these beautiful mountains, where I had passed so many happy hours with the poor but hospitable inhabitants. On the evening before and the morning of my departure, all the people of the neighbourhood, Chinese and Siamese, came to say adieu, and offered me presents of fruits, dried fish, fowls, tobacco, and rice, cooked in various ways with brown sugar, all in greater quantities than I could possibly carry away. The farewells of these good mountaineers were touching. They kissed my hands and feet, and I confess that my eyes were not dry. They accompanied me to a great distance, begging me not to forget them, and to pay them another visit. End of chapter 5.